At 10:42 in the morning on December 1st, 1944, Lieutenant Alfred Rose climbed into the turret of an M36 Jackson tank destroyer positioned on high ground northeast of Beeck, Germany, learning controls he barely understood, while German armor moved through the countryside 2 miles away. 26 years old, 3 weeks with the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion, 0 confirmed kills. The Germans had sent parts of the 5th Panzer Army across the Rhineland, including at least 40 Panther tanks whose front armor could bounce American rounds from 800 yards away. Rose's battalion had lost 11 tank destroyers in November, 17 crewmen dead. The pattern was always the same. German gunners spotted American positions first, fired first. American crews died before they understood what hit them. The M10 Wolverine tank destroyers they had been using couldn't get through Panther armor beyond 500 yards. By the time American crews got close enough for a kill shot, German 88mm guns had already turned their vehicles into burning coffins. The Army's solution arrived in September. The M36 Jackson, 90mm main gun based on a Sherman body, but mounting the most powerful American tank gun in Europe. It could get through 5.6 inches of armor at 1,500 yards. On paper, it was the answer to the Panther problem. In reality, Rose had fired exactly 4 training rounds through the gun. He didn't know the aiming markings, didn't know the ranging system, didn't know if the telescopic sights adjustments matched the technical manual or some field change nobody had written down. His commander had told him to learn the system fast. The battalion was being moved to support Operation Clipper, the push to clear German forces from the Siegfried Line fortifications around Eilenkirchen. Intelligence reported German armor counterattacking along the entire area. Panthers, Tiger tanks, self-propelled guns. The kind of targets that required gunners who knew their equipment perfectly. Rose studied the M36F telescopic sight, mounted in front of the gunner's position. The aiming marks showed range markings in 100-yard increases. The longest marking read 4,600 yards. Maximum effective range, 2.61 miles. He had never heard of anyone fighting armor at that distance. Tank battles happened at 500 yards, maybe 1,000 if you had good terrain. Anything beyond, that was artillery work. If you want to see how Rose's crash course in the M36's systems turned out, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories from the Second World War. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Rose. The Jackson's turret was cramped. Loader to his left. Commander above and behind. Assistant driver and driver down in the hull. Rose moved his hands over the turning controls, the up and down wheel, the firing mechanism. Everything felt strange. 3 weeks wasn't enough time to build the muscle memory that kept gunners alive. He needed months. He had hours. The high ground northeast of Beeck offered clear sight lines across the German countryside. Open fields, scattered tree lines, a highway running roughly parallel to their position. Good terrain for spotting targets. Also good terrain for being spotted. German forward observers had been calling in artillery all week. The battalion had learned to stay spread out, never putting more than 2 vehicles together. Rose pressed his face against the rubber eyepiece of the M36F sight. The lenses were clean. Magnification was decent. He practiced tracking across the horizon, getting used to how the aiming mark moved as he adjusted elevation. The range markings were exact. 400, 800, 1,200, all the way out to that final marking at 4,600 yards. At 11:15, movement caught his eye at the very edge of the sight picture. Something dark, angular, moving slowly across his field of view at a distance that seemed impossible for direct firefighting. The target was moving left to right across Rose's field of view at what he guessed was extreme range. Through the M36F telescopic sight, the shape became the clear outline of a German Panther tank. Low profile, long gun barrel, the typical sloped armor that made front hits nearly impossible. It was traveling along what appeared to be a road or highway, moving at perhaps 6 to 8 miles per hour. Rose's first thought was to report the sighting and let someone else deal with it. The range had to be over 2 miles. Nobody fought tanks at 2 miles. The bullet drop alone would send rounds sailing over the target or burying into the ground hundreds of yards short. The side wind would push shells off course. The room for error at that distance was measured in tiny parts of a degree. But the Panther wasn't zigzagging, wasn't taking escape action. It was moving in a straight line along that distant road, completely unaware that an American tank destroyer was tracking it from high ground 2.5 miles away. The kind of target that appeared once in a war, if you were lucky. The kind Rose had exactly zero experience fighting. He checked the aiming mark again. The M36 F sight had been designed for the 90mm gun specifically. The range markings weren't random. They had been calculated based on the gun's muzzle speed, the standard armor-piercing round's flight qualities, and typical fighting conditions. The engineers who designed this sight had included that 4,600-yard marking for a reason. They believed the gun could reach that far. Whether it could hit anything at that distance was a different question. Rose began calculating. The Panther was moving sideways to his position. That meant he would need to lead the target. At 2.5 miles, the round would take several seconds to reach impact. During that time, the Panther would keep moving. He would need to aim ahead of the tank by dozens of yards, maybe more. The exact math required knowing the exact range, the exact speed of the target, and the flight time of the shell. He had none of those numbers with certainty. The M36 Jackson carried two types of main gun ammunition. The M82 armor-piercing capped round was designed for getting through armor. It had a large explosive filler that exploded after getting through, creating maximum damage inside. At 500 yards, it could punch through 5.1 inches of armor. At 1,000 yards, 4.8 inches. At 4,600 yards, the penetration tables in the technical manual simply stopped listing values. The assumption was that nobody would try shots at that range. Rose understood the science. Every yard of distance meant more speed loss, more drop, more wind push. By the time an M82 round traveled 4,600 yards, it will have lost significant energy. It might not get through the Panther's front armor, even if it hit. But the Panther's side armor was a different story. 40 to 50 millimeters thick, 1.6 to 2 inches. Vulnerable to the 90mm gun, even at long range. The target continued its steady movement across the distant highway. Rose made a decision that broke every rule of tank destroyer training he had been taught. He was going to try the shot, not because he thought it would work, but because this was the only way to learn if the M36's systems could actually work at their maximum range on paper. His hand moved to the turning control. He began tracking the Panther, keeping it centered in the aiming mark while his mind raced through the things he would need to account for. Rose called out the sighting to his commander without taking his eye from the telescopic sight. Panther, extreme range, moving sideways. The commander climbed up beside him, looked through his own lenses, and went silent for 5 seconds. When he spoke, his answer was simple. Rose's call. Rose's shot. The loader already had an M82 armor-piercing round loaded. Standard procedure. Tank destroyers kept AP rounds loaded at all times when in combat zones. Rose focused on the ranging problem. The M76 F sight showed distance markings, but guessing range to a moving target at 2.5 miles required more than eyeballing the aiming mark. He needed to bracket the target with ranging shots. Ranging fire was standard practice for artillery. Shoot short, shoot long. Walk the rounds onto target until you found the correct elevation and lead. For a tank destroyer fighting armor at 400 yards, ranging fire was suicide. It gave away your position, gave the enemy time to shoot back or move. But at 4,600 yards, the Panther crew wouldn't hear the shots, wouldn't see the gun flash, wouldn't know they were being shot at until rounds started hitting near their position. Rose set the elevation for what he guessed was 4,000 yards, short of where he believed the target actually was. He wanted to see where the round hit so he could adjust. The turning controls let him track the Panther's movement. The tank was keeping steady speed along that distant highway. Rose led the target by about 50 yards. His best guess at making up for the Panther's forward movement during the shell's flight time. He pressed the firing trigger. The 90mm gun's kick rocked the entire turret. The muzzle blast was huge, even with the double baffle muzzle brake the Army had started installing in November. Smoke and dust blocked the sight picture for 2 seconds. When it cleared, Rose kept his eye pressed to the lens, watching for impact. At 4,000 yards, the time of flight was about 6 seconds. Rose counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nothing visible. The distance was too great to see the actual impact through the telescopic sight. He would need to fire again and watch for dust clouds or ground shake that might show where the round landed. He adjusted elevation upward, added another 100 yards to his guess. The Panther was still moving along the highway, clearly unaware that someone was shooting at it from a distance that was 4 times normal tank fighting ranges. Rose led the target again, this time by 60 yards to account for increased flight time at the longer range. Second shot. The gun fired. Recoil. Smoke. Rose kept the sight trained on the area where he expected impact. 6 seconds of flight time, maybe 7 at this range. He counted again while keeping the Panther centered in his field of view. The target continued its steady movement. No sign it was taking escape action. No sign its crew had spotted the American position on the high ground northeast of Beeck. Then Rose saw it. A small dust cloud bursting on the highway surface about 20 yards short of the Panther's position. The round had hit close. Very close. Close enough that Rose now had solid information for his final adjustment. He knew the range. He knew the lead. He knew the bullet drop. He made one final elevation correction. Added 10 yards to his lead calculation to account for the Panther's continued forward movement. Set the range marking on the aiming mark to exactly 4,600 yards. The maximum marking on the M36 telescopic sight. He waited for the Panther to move into the exact position where his math said the round would cross the target's path. The moment came. Rose fired the third shot. The 90mm round covered 4,600 yards in about 7 seconds. Rose kept the Panther centered in his telescopic sight, watching for impact. The M82 armor-piercing shell was traveling at roughly 1,500 feet per second when it left the barrel. By the time it reached maximum range, speed had dropped a lot. But physics helped Rose in one important way. The Panther's side armor was only 40 to 50 millimeters thick. Even a slowed 90mm round kept enough energy to get through that. The hit was visible through the M76 sight as a bright flash on the Panther's left side hull. Rose had led the target perfectly. The round struck the tank just behind the front road wheel, exactly where the side armor was thinnest and where the ammunition storage bins were located. The impact was followed right away by a larger second explosion. The Panther's own 79 rounds of 75mm ammunition exploding inside the fighting area. The German tank jerked to a stop. Smoke began pouring from the turret hatches. The crew would be dead or dying. A direct hit into the ammunition storage area at that location meant terrible internal damage. The blast would have killed the loader instantly. The pressure wave would have hurt everyone else in the turret. Even if some crew members survived the first explosion, they had seconds to get out before the fire reached the fuel tanks. Rose didn't stop shooting. Standard procedure for tank destroyer crews was to keep shooting until the target was confirmed destroyed. A stopped tank wasn't necessarily a dead tank. German crews were trained to play dead, waiting for American units to move past before restarting their vehicles and attacking from behind. Rose had heard stories from other battalions about Panthers that had taken multiple hits, looked knocked out, then came back to action 30 minutes later after crews made field repairs. He reloaded with another M82 armor-piercing round and fired again. Fourth shot, same point of aim. The round hit the Panther's hull near the original hit point. By now, the fire inside was spreading. The fifth shot used high explosive instead of armor-piercing. The rounds were devastating against stopped vehicles. The explosion ripped away outside parts and made sure the fire would burn everything inside the tank. Rose fired a sixth round, then a seventh. He kept shooting until flames were clearly coming out of every hatch and vision port on the Panther. The thick black smoke typical of burning diesel fuel rose from the wreck in a column that would be visible for miles. There was no chance of that crew surviving. No chance of that tank coming back to service. The fight had lasted about 2 minutes from first shot to confirmed kill. Rose had used 7 90mm rounds, 3 for ranging, to make sure it was destroyed. The range was 4,600 yards, 2.61 miles. The maximum effective range of the M36F telescopic sight mounted in the M36 Jackson. When Rose finally pulled back from the sight, his hand was shaking. Not from fear, from realizing what he just did. He destroyed a Panther tank at a range that was longer than every fighting distance he had ever heard of in armored warfare. The shot would go into the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion's after-action report. It would be witnessed and checked by his commander and the other crew members in the Jackson. It would become part of the official record. What Rose didn't know was that his confirmed kill at 4,600 yards would remain the second longest tank versus tank fight in military history for the next 47 years. Only 500 yards short of a record that wouldn't be broken until a British Challenger tank made an impossible shot during the Gulf War in 1991. The burning Panther stayed visible on the distant highway for the next 30 minutes. Other American units in the area reported the smoke column. Forward observers tried to figure out if it was a knocked-out German vehicle or a destroyed American position. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion's operations officer finally confirmed the kill through map coordinates and timeline matching. Rose's position on the high ground northeast of Beeck lined up perfectly with the sight lines to the burning wreck. By 1300 hours, word of the shot had spread through the battalion. A lieutenant nobody had heard of 3 weeks ago had just made the longest confirmed tank destroyer kill in the European theater. Crews from other M36 Jacksons started asking questions. What range marking did he use? How many ranging shots? What was the lead calculation? Rose didn't have clean answers. He had fired by instinct and science, not by some repeatable formula other gunners could memorize. The M36 Jackson had only been in combat since September. 4 months of service. American tank destroyer battalions had spent most of 1944 fighting with the M10 Wolverine, a vehicle whose 3-inch gun couldn't reliably get through German heavy armor beyond 600 yards. The M18 Hellcat was faster, but carried the same weak gun. When Panthers and Tigers started appearing in large numbers during the Normandy campaign, American crews found themselves outgunned at every fighting range. The 90mm gun changed that situation. It was adapted from anti-aircraft artillery, a weapon designed to reach bombers at 15,000 feet altitude. Putting that gun in a moving turret on a Sherman base body gave American forces their first vehicle able to fight German heavy armor on equal terms. The M36 could get through Panther front armor at 1,000 yards. It could destroy Tigers at ranges where the Tiger's 88mm gun struggled to get through the M36's front slope. But the weapon's true ability went far beyond normal fighting distances. The 90mm M3 gun had a muzzle speed of 2,700 feet per second. The M82 armor-piercing round weighed 24 pounds. Basic science said that combination could reach targets at 4,000 yards or more. The question wasn't whether the gun could shoot that far. The question was whether anyone could aim accurately enough to hit a moving tank at that distance. Rose had answered that question, not through better training, not through months of practice, through 2 ranging shots that gave him the information he needed to make the third shot count. The fight showed something the Army's weapons department had suspected but never confirmed in combat. The M76F telescopic sight's maximum range marking of 4,600 yards wasn't just on paper. It was real. German forces in the area kept using Panthers throughout December. Rose's battalion ran into them regularly during the push toward the Roer River. But none of those fights happened at extreme range. German crews had learned from 2 years of fighting on the Eastern Front. They used terrain. They avoided open ground. They put their tanks in covered positions where American forces would have to get within 500 yards to get clear shots. The conditions that allowed Rose's shot were unique. High ground giving elevation advantage. Open terrain with clear sight lines. A German crew moving along an exposed highway without taking tactical precautions, and a gunner who was willing to try something that the rules said was impossible. Those conditions wouldn't happen again for the rest of the war. By mid-December, the German counterattack in the Ardennes pulled most American armored units away from the Ruhr area. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion moved to support operations against the Bulge. Rose would fire his M36's 90mm gun many more times before Germany surrendered in May. But he would never again try a shot at 4,600 yards. The Battle of the Bulge began 16 days after Rose's record shot. On December 16th, German forces launched their huge counterattack through the Ardennes forest. 3 entire armies, 200,000 troops, 600 tanks, including the newest Panthers and King Tigers. The attack caught American forces completely by surprise. Within 48 hours, German armored spearheads had pushed 30 miles into Allied lines. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion got emergency orders on December 18th. Move south immediately. Support the 7th Armored Division at St. Vith. The town was a critical road junction. If German forces captured it, they would have direct access to the Meuse River crossings. The entire northern shoulder of the American defensive line would collapse. Rose's company moved through Belgium in darkness. The roads were chaos. Supply trucks heading west away from the German advance. Infantry units trying to reach defensive positions. Artillery batteries moving while under fire. The 814th arrived at St. Vith on December 19th and went right into action. German Panther battalions were already fighting American positions on the eastern approaches to the town. The fighting around St. Vith looked nothing like Rose's long-range fight at Beeck. This was close-quarters armor combat. Panthers appearing from tree lines at 300 yards. American tank destroyers firing from behind burning buildings. German infantry with Panzerfaust hunting M36s through village streets. The kind of fighting where the side that spotted first one, where waiting just seconds meant death. Rose's Jackson took up position on the southern edge of St. Vith on December 20th. His field of fire covered a road junction where German armor was expected to attack. The range was 800 yards. Standard fighting distance. No fancy calculations needed. Just point the 90mm gun at center mass and shoot when targets appeared. The attack came at dawn on December 21st, for Panthers supported by 2 companies of Panzer Grenadiers. Rose's company knocked out 2 Panthers in the first minute of fighting. German return fire destroyed 1 M36 and damaged 2 others. The fight lasted 14 minutes. When it ended, all 4 German tanks were burning and the infantry had pulled back. American losses were 3 tank destroyers destroyed, 11 crew members dead or wounded. Rose survived St. Vith. His Jackson took 2 hits from German 75mm guns. Both bounced off the front armor. The M36's sloped front plate was effectively 140mm thick when hit at an angle. German guns had trouble getting through it beyond 600 yards. But the open top turret was weak to artillery air bursts and falling fire. Several M36s in the battalion were knocked out by indirect fire during the week-long defense of St. Vith. By December 23rd, American forces had to leave the town. German pressure was too much. The 7th Armored Division did a fighting withdrawal westward. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion provided rear guard, fighting German pursuit forces at every defensible position. Rose fired his 90mm gun 43 times during the withdrawal, all at ranges under 1,000 yards. All at targets he could see clearly through his telescopic sight. The difference from his December 1st fight was total. At Beeck, he had had time to calculate, time to range his shots, time to carefully fight a target that didn't know it was being hunted. At St. Vith and during the withdrawal, combat happened at reflex speed. See target, identify target, fire. No ranging shots, no careful math. Just the desperate math of kill or be killed armor warfare. Rose would never forget the Panther burning on that distant highway at 4,600 yards. But the shots that kept him alive through the Bulge were the ones he made at point-blank range against tanks that were shooting back. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion spent January 1945 rebuilding after the Bulge. The battalion had lost 19 M36 Jacksons during the German attack. 26 crew members killed, 41 wounded. Replacement vehicles arrived from storage areas in France. Replacement crews came straight from training places in the United States. Most had never fired a 90mm gun in combat. Rose found himself training the new gunners, teaching them the M36 telescopic sight, explaining how to guess range, how to lead moving targets, how to adjust for wind and elevation. The new crews asked about his 4,600-yard shot. Rose told them to forget it. That kind of fight happened once in a war. What they needed to learn was how to kill Panthers at 500 yards while under fire. That was the skill that kept tank destroyer crews alive. By February, the battalion was back in action. American forces were pushing toward the Rhine River. German resistance was falling apart, but stayed fierce at key defensive positions. Panthers and King Tigers still appeared wherever the Wehrmacht tried to hold ground. The M36 Jackson remained the most effective American answer to German heavy armor. Its 90mm gun could get through any German tank from the front at normal combat ranges. Rose took part in the Rhine crossing operations in March. His Jackson was part of the support element for the 9th Army's attack near Wesel. German forces on the East Bank included parts of 3 panzer divisions. The fighting was intense, but short. American air superiority and overwhelming artillery support broke German defensive positions within 48 hours. Rose's company knocked out 6 Panthers and 2 King Tigers during the crossing, all at ranges under 800 yards. April brought the final push into Germany's industrial heartland. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion advanced through the Ruhr pocket, fighting scattered German resistance. Most German armor units had been destroyed or had run out of fuel. The Panthers and Tigers that had dominated European battlefields for 2 years were burning wrecks or abandoned hulls scattered across hundreds of miles of terrain. Rose saw his last combat action on April 23rd near the Elbe River. A single Panther appeared from a farm complex at about 600 yards. The German crew was trying to retreat eastward ahead of American forces. Rose shot with 2 rounds. Both hits. The Panther burned. It was his 47th confirmed kill with the M36's 90mm gun. 46 of those kills happened at ranges under 1,000 yards. Germany surrendered on May 8th. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion got orders to prepare for moving to the Pacific Theater. The plan was to give the battalion newer M36 versions and use them against Japanese armor in the expected invasion of the home islands. The atomic bombs dropped in August made that invasion unnecessary. Rose never fired the 90mm gun in combat again. The after-action reports from December 1st, 1944, stayed in the battalion's official records. Lieutenant Alfred Rose, M36 Jackson, Panther destroyed at 4,600 yards, witnessed and verified. The shot was written about in multiple Army publications over the following decades. Military historians studying tank warfare mentioned it as proof of the M36's abilities. Gunnery instructors used it as an example of what was possible in theory with proper ranging and math. But the shot's real importance wasn't the distance. It was what the fight showed about the change in armored warfare. The M36 Jackson represented the peak of American tank destroyer development during the Second World War. A vehicle that could fight and destroy the most heavily armored German tanks at ranges that went beyond anything the rules had expected. Rose's shot at 4,600 yards proved the weapon could work at the absolute limits of its design. And for 47 years, that record stood as the second longest tank kill in military history. The record Rose set on December 1st, 1944, stayed unbroken through Korea, through Vietnam, through decades of Cold War tank development and training refinement. The United States Army kept improving its armored vehicle abilities. Better guns, better fire control systems, better ammunition. But no American tank crew ever wrote down a confirmed kill at a greater range than Rose's 4,600 yards. The British Army broke the record on February 26, 1991. A Challenger 1 main battle tank with a call sign 11 Bravo was working in Iraq during Operation Desert Storm. The crew spotted an Iraqi tank at extreme range during the ground war to free Kuwait. The gunner fired a depleted uranium round using advanced fire control computers and heat sensing systems that didn't exist in 1944. The round hit at 5,100 yards, 3.1 miles, the longest confirmed tank versus tank kill in military history. Rose's shot fell to second place. But context matters. The Challenger crew in 1991 had laser rangefinders, math computers, stabilized gun platforms, digital fire control systems that automatically calculated lead and elevation. Rose had mechanical controls, an optical sight, and 3 years of wartime experience packed into 3 weeks. He made his shot with tools from 1944 against a target moving at maximum fighting range in combat conditions. The M36 Jackson stayed in American service through the Korean War. The vehicle worked well against North Korean and Chinese armor. Its 90mm gun could get through any tank the communist forces used. But fighting ranges in Korea were usually much shorter than in Europe. Mountain terrain and limited sight lines meant most tank battles happened at ranges under 500 yards. No gunner repeated Rose's extreme range fight. Rose survived the war. He left active duty in 1946 and went back to civilian life. The Army tried to recruit him for gunnery instructor positions at Fort Knox, but he said no. He'd spent 3 years shooting at people. He was done. The records show he never talked publicly about his December 1st fight. No interviews, no memoirs, no attempts to use being part of military history. The after-action reports stayed in the files. Historians found them decades later while researching tank destroyer operations in Northwest Europe. The fight at 4,600 yards appeared in several school papers on armored warfare. Military analysts used it as a case study in the limits of direct firefighting. The shot represented the absolute maximum effective range for Second World War-era tank guns working under perfect conditions. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty files every single day. Stories about tank destroyer gunners who saved lives with calculations and cold precision. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Lieutenant Alfred Rose doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.